This week on Into the Podverse, my guest is Nochi, a doctor and host of the audio series Nigerian History Now You Know. Nochi has dedicated years of research and exploration to uncover the rich tapestry of Nigeria's past. His quest for a deep understanding of the country's history has allowed him to shed light on pivotal events, remarkable individuals, and the diverse cultures that have shaped Nigeria into what it is today. His passion for history is contagious, and his ability to connect the dots and present a comprehensive narrative will leave you with a newfound appreciation for the depth and complexity of Nigerian history. So get ready to have your preconceptions challenged and your knowledge expanded as we embark on this enlightening journey.
Pretty sure it's Techzilla.
Hi, I'm Molly Jensen.
Hi, I'm Kevin White Brown.
I'm Kim Fox, and you're listening to
Into the Podverse with my dad,
Tony Dill.
Hi guys, my name is Nochi, and my podcast is titled Nigerian History Now You Know.
Nochi unravels the inspirations behind Nigerian History Now You Know, a podcast that seeks to uncover the hidden treasures of our nation's past.
A few things have inspired me to work on this podcast. One of the most important things is, since when I was a child, I've always loved reading about history. I think I consider myself a 60s or 70s baby at heart. I've always loved being fascinated by that time, that era. And then, even the eras before that, I've loved to read a lot about it. And I think I enjoyed reading it. So that was one of the things that that inspired me to work on a podcast like this. But the second thing is that in my love to read on those things, I discovered that there is not as much information available. So you can love to read about and learn about some things, but if you don't have enough information available, then you don't get to learn as much as you want to. And I think that's one of the major inspirations of this podcast. I think I said it in the first episode. I want to learn. And there isn't as much information out there as possible. And that, really makes me feel some type of way. And that's why I want to do this podcast. I want to have as much information about Nigerian and African history possible. And that was one of the things that inspired me. The third thing that inspired me is, as a people in Nigeria and Africa, we aren't living up to our potential. And I think that the only way we can live up to our potential is if we are united, if we work together. But if we don't understand each other and understand where we're coming from as a people, we can't move forward. So if we learn about our history, because our history defines who we are today, if we learn about our history and then we learn about each other's cultures, where each and every one of us is coming from, I think it builds understanding about our current predicament and understanding about each other. And when we have understanding about each other, we're able to work together. And if we work together as Nigerians, if we work together as Africans, we are unstoppable.
Starting a podcast may seem like a daunting task, especially when you're waiting for the perfect moment to begin. But what if starting small is the best way forward?
I've always wanted to do this podcast for the longest time. I've always wanted to have this platform, but I was waiting for the right time. I was waiting for to be able to afford buying equipment. I was waiting to have a bigger platform. I was waiting till I could afford to have guests on the podcast, because that's what I always want. That's the idea. I want to bring people who are knowledgeable about different historical facts on my platform. And then when I bring them on, they just teach us because I want to learn. But I think that there's something beautiful about starting small, because nobody ever starts from the top. So I just decided to do it. I don't have any equipment. I record on my phone. I record with my headphones, basically. And I just started. I think the way most of us can turn our ideas into reality is just to start from somewhere. And when you start from somewhere, you can eventually, things get better, you improve, you're able to afford things that you can afford, and then, things get better. So basically just start. That's where I'm at right now.
Research is the backbone of any historical podcast, but it doesn't always begin when you decide to hit record. For the episode on the Nigerian Civil War, the research process had been a lifelong pursuit, fueled by curiosity and a thirst for knowledge.
My research process for this particular episode didn't start when I wanted to do this episode. For part of the reason why I was able to comfortably talk about the Nigerian Civil War is because it's something that has intrigued me for the longest time. And like I said earlier, I spent a lot of my childhood reading about Nigerian history. And it intrigued me because I was an Igbo person who has lived majority of my life in Jos, which is considered a northern Nigerian city, and currently living in Yola. So it's something that I have read extensively on. I've always wondered what my reality would have been. What my reality would have been if I was alive at that time. And that is part of the reason why I have read extensively on it. Over the years, I've read different books. I remember about a year or two ago, I read The Making of an African Legend, which is a book by Frederick Forsyth, which gives a lot of insight into the Biafran aspect of the war. Because Frederick Forsyth, who was a foreigner, I think he lived in Biafra at that point in time, and he wrote the story from the Biafran point of view. I also read the book, There Was a Country by Chinua Achebe in the past. And that also gave me an insight into the Biafran part of the, struggle, basically. And I've read a lot of excerpts from other books. There's a book, Why We Struck, by Ademola Ademoyega. I think I mentioned that in the podcast. I've seen some excerpts from that book. I've been unable to get a copy for myself, but I've seen some excerpts from that book, and I've studied some of the things that were mentioned in that book. I watch a lot of documentaries, and I think last year there was a News Africa documentary on the Civil War as well. And there's a lot of great work by, I think, Adeyinka Makinde. I'm subscribed to his YouTube channel. He has a lot of documentaries on this particular topic. And these are, things that I feel each and every Nigerian should come across and go through. And like I mentioned, I have lived a lot of my life in northern Nigeria, and I have had conversations. That's another thing I love to do. I have had numerous conversations with people from the other side of the divide, and I love those conversations. My friends say I love arguments, but I don't call them arguments because we're not trying to fight. We're trying to understand each other. And those conversations with numerous people who have seen it differently than I do gives me a lot of insight into their thinking. And I think that that's what I want people to take away from this podcast. I think that that's what I have been able to understand in the last couple of years, is that you can only ever see an issue from your point of view. And for you to get the whole picture, you need to see it from another person's point of view. The only way you can do that is to have a conversation or read about that person's point of view. When you do, you now understand that person. And when you understand that individual, you people are able to work together and make things better. And that's what I want people to take away from this episode. As Nigerians, we are so divided. There is so much that is dividing us. There is so much that we focus on that divides us, that separates us. And we are only always seeing it from our own point of view. But the way we can move forward is that we can read, learn about the way the other person is seeing it. And that would help us to work together. Because when I understand, okay, this person saw it this way and that was why they acted the way they did, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I hope that they see this is why I reacted a certain way. And when we understand each other, it means that we are no longer fighting each other and we can work together and we can move forward. And that's why I want us to, that's what I want people to take from the podcast. For the research, I don't want people to take my word for it. I want people to do their own research. If you think that some of the things I said in the podcast are wrong, go and do your own research. Go and do your own learning. And that's what I want people to take away from it. They should understand each other. I want us to work together more. And I want people to want to learn these things for themselves.
When it comes to Nigerian history, misconceptions abound. One of the most common fallacies is the belief that there's only one side to a story. But here's the truth. History is a tapestry woven from countless threads, each representing a unique perspective.
I think a common misconception about Nigerian history is that people don't understand Nigerian and African history, but Nigerian history, because that's personal to us as Nigerians, is that people don't understand that history has perspectives and that each person only sees, if you as a person only sees and hears and listens to your history and reads about your history from your own perspective, you only get one side of the story. And let me give an example of that. So using the first episode that I did, the Nigerian Civil War, which is a history that it's a shared history of Nigeria, but has a lot of perspectives. So I, as an Igbo person, if I only read and learn about that history from the perspective of an Igbo person, I don't get the full picture. And vice versa, if somebody from the other side of the divide doesn't read and understand that history from my own perspective as an Igbo person, then they don't get the full picture. Now, because my own perspective of that history is different from theirs, that doesn't make their own perspective wrong. And vice versa, that doesn't make my own perspective wrong. So I think that we need to understand that history has perspectives. And for you to be able to get the full picture of what that history is, you need to see it and understand it from different perspectives. And I think that that's one common misconception. I think the other common misconception about Nigerian and African history is that we don't think it's important. A lot of people are not as bothered as to why things are a certain way. And I think that that is wrong. I think that as a people, as a nation, as a continent, if we want to move forward, we can't ignore where we are coming from. Where we are coming from is important. How our continent came to be, how our previous empires, the strides that were taken before the white people came, before the British came, before the French came to Africa, before the British came to Nigeria, all those things would help us understand our people, our nation more. It's important. The average person in Nigeria is not interested in it because they don't think it's important. We're all considered about where we are going. But I don't think we can move forward properly if we don't understand where we are coming from. And I think that my podcast would aim to address these misconceptions in different ways. One of which is, by the grace of God, if I'm able to get the podcast running properly, I want to bring people with varying perspectives of the same topic and have conversations on it. So using back to my first episode, if I have been able to, if this was when the podcast was up and running and I have the equipment and have people, the ability to bring different people, or the platform that I can bring different people who are well learned in these topics, from different perspectives. I just want them to have different conversations, important conversations, and I want us to learn. And that's the aim of the podcast. I just want people to learn. I want people to see things from a different perspective, a way that they wouldn't have ordinarily seen it. And that's by listening to. And you have to be open-minded. I want people to be open-minded and listen to things from the other point of view. That's one of the ways that my podcast would achieve this. And until I get to that level, for now, that is just going to be me or a few other guests, I would address it as best as I can by listening, learning, and reading about the different perspectives of a particular issue, and want people to understand it. The second thing is that I want people to understand that history is important, and I would keep on hammering on that on my podcast. I want us to have a bank of knowledge of our history as Nigerians and Africans. And that way people have access, because that's one of the things that I struggled with when I wanted to learn about history. There is a paucity of information, and I want people to have access to that information. And that's one of the ways my podcast will address that.
Nochi also shares the challenges he faces in the course of production.
I think the most challenging part of producing this low-budget podcast has had to be producing audible enough sound that is very audible and clear enough for people to hear. Because of the fact that I don't have great recording equipment, there's usually a lot of background noise, interference, and all of that. So producing clean enough sound for people who listen to the podcast to be able to hear what I'm saying as clearly as possible, that has been one of my big challenges, more so because I spent my uni years studying something in health, and I've been working in health. So this is entirely new to me. But I've been able to work on these challenges by having conversations with people. So I knew a few people who had their own podcast that I was able to talk to, and they gave me one or two pointers that they could. I know someone who is a sound engineer. So with the equipment I have now, he was able to tell me, this is what you can do, this is what you can do now. Ultimately, the plan is to save up enough money to get proper podcast equipment for now. But for now, this is where we are at, and this has been the most challenging thing. But I'm loving the experience.
The journey for Nochi's Nigerian History Now You Know is just beginning, and the road ahead is filled with captivating topics waiting to be explored. From the history of religion and tribes to the oil boom and military coups, he aims to traverse the annals of time, unraveling the narratives that have shaped our nation.
Looking forward in future episodes of my podcast, I want to cover as many topics as possible. I want to talk about the history of religion in this country, the different religions and how they came to be. I want to talk about the history of our tribes in this country, how our tribes became to be, how did the numerous amount of tribes we have in this country. And I think that can help us address tribalism in the long run. I want to talk about the oil boom in Nigeria and how it was to be in Nigeria at the time. I want to talk about the different military coups that we've had. I want to talk about the history of our economic structures, the kind of economic structure that we run. I want to talk about the history of democracy in Nigeria. I want to talk about the history of our banking sector. I want to talk about the history of our health sector. I want to talk about the history of art. We've had so many great artists in this country. I want to talk about the history of art and how it became relevant in this country. I want to talk about music, the history of our music and how it has evolved over the years. I want to talk about our different cultures. So in every episode, I want to highlight a different cultural practice or festival that goes on in this country, so that people learn about other people's culture and festivals and want to attend, want to appreciate those other things. I want to talk about African history as well. I want to talk about our continent, how it existed years before the white man came. I want to talk about obviously the transatlantic slave trade. I want to talk about the Berlin Conference, how a group of Europeans just sat down and they divided a continent and decided that they were going to own part of that continent. I want to talk about Nigeria, how it came to be, the amalgamation. I I want to talk about, for my next episode, someone contacted me and he has his own podcast and we want to talk about the Indian Ocean trade, want to talk about the Swahili coast, want to talk about great African leaders, Patrice Lumumba, Thomas Sankara, the impact that they had in Africa. And I want to also talk about sports in Africa. I want to talk about the history of sports in Nigeria. I just want to learn as much as possible. I want us to learn as much as possible. So these are the type of topics that I will be looking forward to discuss in the future and so much more on my podcast. Hi, I'm Nochi of the Nigerian History Now You Know podcast, and you are listening to Into the Podverse with Tony Doe.
Before we conclude this episode, I want to extend my heartfelt appreciation to Nochi for elevating the narrative and bringing a unique perspective to the exploration of Nigeria's complex history. To you listening, I encourage you to delve deeper into the captivating world of Nigeria's history by checking out Nochi's podcast, Nigerian History Now You Know. It's available on Spotify and AfriPods, and this podcast promises to take you on an enlightening journey through the corridors of our past. Thank you for tuning in to Into the Podverse this week, and until next time, keep podcasting and embracing the power of your voice.
Pretty sure it's Techzilla.
Of course it is. Who do you think it was? Hey yo, eagle eye view from the Kilimanjaro. Way above the clouds with my eye on the sparrow. Words pierce the air, invading your space. Sneak in through your ears, change the look on your face. The storyteller in this digital era. Could tell I got my groove back like my name was Stella. The vibe is stellar, but the message and the teller intertwining, defining the era. To those who oppose, I hereby propose the fist to the jaw, would you prefer the nose? As the story goes, everybody knows Mr. Tony Doe, come correct with the flow. Hey yo, as the God podcaster, erstwhile known as the Shifu broadcaster, here to bring the peace to the world over. Haters can't connect, best to move over.